Представить гостевую лекцию нашего уважаемого преподавателя Фарука Ульгена из Университета Гренобля, из Франции. И Фарук Ульген является не только преподавателем из Университета Гренобля, но одним из руководителей программы, которая уже более 25 лет существует совместно с Университетом Гренобля, и которую мы успешно реализуем. И вот буквально сегодня, кстати говоря, мы обсуждали возможности развития, реформирования этой программы, включения каких-то новых компонентов, в том числе дистанционных. И поэтому сегодня мы решили провести эту лекцию в таком режиме вебинара. У нас вот здесь есть студенты этой программы, которые будут слушать лекцию очно и задавать вопросы, участвовать в этом процессе. Ну а потом для тех, кто что-то захочет повторить или, например, сейчас не может присутствовать в онлайн-режиме, эта лекция будет разослана в записи, и ее можно будет посмотреть то количество раз, которое будет необходимо. Итак, мое вступительное слово закончено. Я всем желаю успехов и интересных полутора часов, которые можно будет провести совместно с Фаруком Ульгеном. Я надеюсь, что у всех все работает, есть обратная связь. Кстати, те, кто с нами сейчас онлайн, пожалуйста, как-то покажите, что вы нас слышите, или если есть какие-то проблемы, тоже пишите в чате. Ага, к чату не удается подключиться пока. Хорошо, ну, без технических проблем у нас как бы не бывает, естественно, мы их постепенно решаем. Я надеюсь, что в процессе можно будет подключиться к чату и задавать, соответственно, вопросы. Сейчас Фарук к нам подойдет, и мы с вами начинаем его лекцию, которая, еще раз повторю, потом будет доступна для наших студентов уже во все оставшееся время, когда будет желание. Ну вот сейчас Фарук отошел, буквально он вернется к нам, я думаю, что через минуту-две, и займет вот мое место для проведения лекции. Я пока могу сказать два слова по поводу программы, которую мы проводим. Это программа, которая существует уже в течение, как я сказал, 25 лет и предполагает получение второго диплома. Диплома Университета Гренобль в течение 3 лет параллельного обучения. Формат программы, видимо, будет модифицироваться и каким-то образом меняться. Но я думаю, что все те, кто в этом заинтересован, следите за новостями на сайте iunicon.ru, где собраны все международные возможности по нашим партнерам, возможности для бакалавров, для магистров, для студентов других университетов. Следите за обновлениями, там будет интересно, будет много полезной информации, поэтому you are welcome. Итак, мы начинаем.
Спасибо, Андрей. Okay. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for being here today and to listen to this presentation about the financialization or financialization and instability. So I'll try to give first some knowledge, some information about what we mean by financialization, and then what is instability, and why do we need regulation, financial regulation in the markets, and what could be a good alternative regulation today after the famous well-known 2007-2008 crisis. Well, if you have questions or you would like to maybe develop some specific points, you can stop me and ask your questions or interpret, give your ideas, etc., etc. Okay? So, because otherwise that would be very annoying, very boring, this kind of presentation. Or before getting started, you are all from the first, second, third year, second of this mix of okay, and I think that some people looking to us today are also from other years of bachelor or maybe master programs or something like that. Okay, so I will just make this. I don't know how. Okay, so when we talk about the capitalism is defined, roughly speaking, of course, as do you see me? Yes? No? Okay. Roughly speaking, is identified as an accumulation economy, and this accumulation process is resting on private individuals' decisions. Okay, that's the main characteristic of a capitalist economy through the human story. And in such an economy, people roughly, roughly speaking, in such an economy, people decide of each individual decides of his or her own activities that we call economic activities, because they consist of producing or consuming things. But producing and consuming things doesn't mean that there is a kind of exchange. Capitalism is not an exchange economy. Capitalism is a selling and buying economy. It's not the same thing than the exchange. The exchange is kind of barter. You give to get back another thing. In capitalism, you don't give to get back another thing. You sell or you buy. There is no exchange. Okay, we call it exchange economy. This is just a big mistake of the history of the economics. We use this term because at the beginning we had in mind human society developing through the small markets in the Middle Ages period, for example, where people exchanging different things that they produced and they need to, etc. It's very, very artisanal, very simple economic society. So that's why when we talk about the economy or economics, we talk about a specific society. This society is our society. Where we talk about economic relationships, these relationships were not existing in the past, in the Middle Ages period. Okay, that was another type of society. So when we are talking about this society, our society, that we call capitalism, or you can call to market-based society or individualistic society, whatever the name that you put on, that's the same idea behind. Okay, the individuals, free individuals based society. Okay, and this society is very, very marked by economic relationships, not by cultural, by political, by religious relationship, but mainly by economic relationships. Okay, everyone aims at accumulating some wealth in order to exist in such a society. Before every other social criterion, the major criterion of social existence is economic wealth. Okay. At the same time, this economic wealth is required to let you live in a society in every other way. For example, cultural, when you have to go to the theater, you have to pay for this. Okay? And the economics use a specific term, no free lunch. There is no free lunch in this society. Okay? So the major social relations are resting on economic relations. from this perspective. And these economic relations means this kind of relation, not the social, general way, social relations, okay? That's not family-based, that's not culture-based, that's not religion-based, etc., but economic-based relationships. And economic relationships are resting on monetary relations. That's why capitalist economy is a monetary economy, and I will develop this as the major characteristics of our society. And from this, I will draw the rest of my presentation to show that when you let markets do in monetary and financial domains, the result is usually catastrophic. That's why we have to manage in a public way, extra market way, the monetary and financial relations within society. Okay, so once I asserted that capitalist economy is a monetary economy, now I will talk about more specifically about money and finance. So when we talk about money and finance, what do you have in mind? What's the first thing at which about which you think? Banks. Okay. More. Financial. Okay. More. You think about these things, the bank-related things, the banknotes, or some numbers, but those numbers are not normal mathematical numbers. They are economic numbers. They are monetary units. Okay? You don't talk about, when you talk about money and finance and our economic society, you don't talk about the number of people. Number of people is not an economic variable. Okay, it's a physical or something demographic variable. The number of things that you talk about when you talk about the economics is monetary units. Okay, so these numbers that you can see in this picture are the numbers, the values, the monetary values of, or the indexes related to the monetary values of some corporations, some people, etc., etc. Okay. What's your social value in economic terms? It is your wage, or it is your wealth. You don't exist as an individual in economic terms. You exist only through your monetary, your bank account, for example. Okay. So we think also, when we talk about money and finance, we think also of the big buildings. Banks are big buildings. This is the power. Okay, that's why I put there the building of London Stock Exchange, the famous building here. Okay. So the problem is that I put some pictures there to make it a bit funny, because it is not really funny. It's very boring and it's very dangerous. It's very bloody. There is blood and conflict and violence behind this. Okay? So I put some pictures like this, and you have different things, and these things point to instability, point to problems, point to, you see, tears, and the kind of birds, very violent looking birds. Okay, you have no sense. Why this result? We are there to live in a happy way. Why we are not happy in our life? Okay, so also you have a picture about the foolish behavior of individuals in markets. That means that we do mistakes and we repeat our mistakes. And it is true especially when we are talking about finance. We do the same mistakes When you take the history of financial economics and you take the 19th century, for example, 19th century was full of financial crises, very similar to each other, very similar to our financial crisis of today. So we do them again and again because finance and financial people and we are foolish people. And it's very crazy to know this. We are generating the problems while we are aware of them. We know how to deal with them, how to prevent them, but we repeat them. This is another problem. Also, when we talk about financial crisis, it's very, unfortunately, it's very funny to see that financial crisis doesn't matter for everyone. Why? Because when you look at this picture, this is a picture from I didn't put the name of the guy who made it. The signature is on the picture. Okay. When in financial crisis does matter for involved people. Directly involved people are the market players. Most of them are rich people, wealthy people, investing in markets in order to get lots of money. Okay? And when there are financial crisis, these people are affected negatively or positively. Positively because when you have some losses, some people affected negatively, that means that some other people get back more than what they invested at the beginning. Never in a financial crisis you can have all the people losing money. When one individual or one group of individuals losing money, another group gets it back. Okay? Whatever the way of doing, whatever the way of accounting process. But this does matter only for these people. For the poor people, about more than half of world population, it doesn't matter because these people have no money, no wealth. So financial crisis, there is no problem. They remain always poor. Okay? The poor remains poor, even after financial crisis. That's why I liked very much this picture done after the 2007-2008 crisis. So the lady doesn't understand. Crisis? What crisis? This is my life, everyday life. I have no money, so what's the problem about? Okay. So now, after this, some funny but very boring pictures, I will present you the rest of the analysis. Less boring because there will be no pictures. So the work plan, I will give you this study through 4 points. As you can see, the first about some observations and major statements on the issue that I will study with you today here. Therefore, I will give some points about a monetary economy, what we call the capitalist economy or market-based economy or individuals' decisions-based economy. Therefore, I will give you some elements to understand why finance is a kind of double-edged sword and why financialization does result usually in a kind of general malfunctioning of the entire economy, including the real economy. And then my core proposal consists of thinking of the way of dealing with the recurrent instabilities of financial economies and to suggest an alternative financial regulation framework. Okay. Do you have some remarks or questions about these different statements? I will give further statements, but they will be very similar, close to what I said a few minutes ago. Okay. So first observations and statements about my topic, which is a problematic, which is an issue. First, some observation about the instabilities that we knew in the last decades, but those instabilities are repeated instabilities that you can observe through the entire capitalist economy history since at least 17th century. Okay, and these crises become more and more numerous, but also more and more hard through time, because the development of capitalism is a kind of increasing instabilities process thanks or because of development of financial markets. And there is a big issue, because normally in the economics we assume that financial development means economic development, because finance, as we will show it in a few minutes, financial markets must give the economy, the real economy, the individual entrepreneurs, etc., etc., the means, financial means to invest, to fund their decisions, to create wealth, to generate jobs, etc., etc. Okay, so we observe, on the contrary, that financial development gives, through the history of the capitalist economy, gives usually large crises that we call systemic crisis. So here, my first observation is about the crisis, this kind of crisis, which are recurrent, repeated. Okay, and I take the recent period from the 90s of the last century. Of course, we are in the 21st century now, and time goes on very quickly. And these recent crises during the last 4 decades, for example, okay, raise doubts about the ability or capacity of financial markets to lead the economies to develop on a sustainable path. Okay, and the context that I will study there is the financialization of the economies, and I will give you some definition about the financialized economies. Okay. And this financialization evolves through a kind of very uncertain environment, and has lots of impacts, huge impacts on the economic imbalances that you can observe, and that often generate national or international economic crisis. The aim of this work consists of proposing some directions about a possible relevant financial regulation to better supervise, to better control, maybe to better frame and direct financial markets and financial actors' behavior. And here I take a kind of Minsky position. So the methodology that I will develop here focuses on the first monetary characteristics of a capitalist economy, of a market-based economy, and I will use a specific approach we call institutionalist approach. Why? Because I think that institutionalism specifically in the original sense from the beginning of the 20th century, but also you might use some new or neo-institutionalist models from the 80s and 90s of the last century to understand how a capitalist economy operates. And in this way, you can understand why this way of operating of a capitalist economy often results in a systemic crisis, and especially in financial crisis. Okay. So the core assertion that I will put to the fore here is that financial regulation or financial self-regulation that rests on market incentives usually results in macro instabilities that threat the viability of the entire economy. So a very important issue, okay? The financial crisis or a given financial crisis is not a simple imbalanced situation, but it concerns the whole economy. So the viability of our society, the reproducibility of our society, the possibility or not to wake up tomorrow and to find again the world as you left it yesterday, okay? The certainty, ability to know what would be the future. Okay. So what would be the result, positive result of such a work? So in modest terms, this kind of work could give us an alternative to neoliberal economics. Thank you very much. That dominates today the economic theory, economic policies, and social life. So, some consequences of such a work. This analysis, as I will try to convince you about the relevance of these assertions, of course, normally such an analysis could provide us with alternative regulatory structures that could ensure, in some limits, a systemic stability for financial but also for economic systems. Okay, and one of my first assumptions is that the financial stability is a kind of public good that cannot be produced or provided by the market mechanism. Assuming that market mechanism means the mechanism that make the world work through principally through decentralized private, self-interest-based individuals' decisions. If such mechanism, relying on individuals' decisions, cannot work to provide stability, we have to imagine other ways, other mechanisms, we have two alternatives and some middle ways, but two main alternatives. Market mechanisms, decentralized individual decisions, or public mechanisms, organization, framing of things, markets, societies, etc., through public power. Okay, whatever the way of the way of doing this. Okay, the practical way can be different. That might take some more dictatorial forms or more decentralized democratic ways. But whatever the way, whatever the degree of decentralization or centralization, the issue remains the same. Market mechanisms cannot provide society with the tools required to make society stable. Here I will talk about only financial markets, not about the whole society, okay? So, from this perspective, I assert that financial stability is a public good, and I will give you what does it mean, this kind of assertion, what is a public good, and then why and how you can imagine that financial stability can be regarded, seen as a public good, okay? And the other symmetrical side of this first assertion is that through this kind of approach to financial stability, we can prevent maybe, or in a better way, the public bad. The public bad is instability. Okay? Financial stability is a public good, and financial instability and the crisis is a public bad. Okay? That could not be prevented from market by through market mechanism. Okay? So the proposal, the final proposal, is about the a framework of extra market preventive financial regulation. Okay? And the word preventive is very important, because preventive means you intervene before, not after. Okay? So just maybe a remark within some brackets here. I have in mind by this word preventive or prevention, by this adjective, the idea that the regulation must be resting on the rule of intervening in order to prevent, not intervening after the crisis. Today, we are in a what we call the neoliberal or liberal, shortly speaking, world where the rule is the intervention after. That means that you let markets, you let individuals do, and you intervene if things don't work. Okay? So the problem is, in financial markets, the problem is things don't work. When they do work, it's just for some years, and then they result in systemic crisis that you cannot cancel, you cannot come back. When you have a crisis, things are ill done. Okay? So to prevent this, the principle of prevention consists of preventing, so to avoid this kind of situation, the rule is preventing markets, people, etc., from undertaking activities able or potentially able to create this kind of, to generate this kind of systemic crisis. Okay? If the systemic crisis is a public bad, we have to prevent it by the production of a public good, which is its opposite, which is the financial stability. Okay? So this is a classical problematic. It's not a novelty, what I talk about today. Financial stability is a public good, and it is not an anti-liberal idea, because I will show you lots of economists, liberal economists, are agreeing or are okay with this proposal of regarding financial stability as a public good. Okay? So here you can take, for example, I don't know if you got this kind of courses before, you can take the case of the comparison between social or societal advantages of a given activity and the private advantages of the same activity. And when you compare them between with each other, if you have the possibility to assess their values, respective values, you say if the social advantage is higher than the private advantage, in this case, usually the private market mechanisms are not able, they have no incentive to produce the thing, here the financial stability, because they will not get back enough return to compensate their engagement, their investments to produce such a good. Okay? In this case, as we assume that the good we are talking about is required, we need it, if private market mechanisms wouldn't produce this good, we have to find another way. This another way, as I said a few minutes ago, is the public power, is the public production of the good. Okay? Required for the whole society, but the society or market mechanism cannot produce spontaneously because it's so expensive, or it is impossible. And I will show you, financial stability cannot be produced not only because it's so expensive for private producers, but also it's impossible to be produced by private producers, because private producers have no means, no ability, no capacity to produce macro stability, to make societies stable through their own individual activities. The simple explanation of this, without any further development, is that when you undertake an individual activity, you undertake it according to your knowledge, individual personal knowledge, according to your individual personal aims, objectives, envies, desires. We are 8 billion people on earth, and 8 billion different people. You cannot think of what the others need, what the others would like to get, etc., etc. First, and second, at least. Second is that you don't decide of the welfare, the well-being of 8 billion people. You decide of your welfare and your well-being. We are in an individualistic decision-based society. Okay? So then there is an incompatibility between individual decisions and rationality and macro decisions and requirements and rationality. In other words, I will say there is no bridge between microeconomic rationality, which is individual rationality, and macroeconomic rationality, which is macroeconomic stability. Okay? And financial issues are related to this opposition. So now, after all these different things, it's okay, you are alive. Okay, well, that's what we need before it. Some words about the characteristics of a monetary economy. So, the first question, what's money? Money, you have lots of songs on money, but one of them is very famous, which says, money, 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 for example. Or you have from ABBA. Also, you have the famous song from Pink Floyd. You have the famous song from Dire Straits. You have the famous song from Donna Summer. Lots of singers, famous singers, had this kind of thing related to money. Money is society, is our society. But what's it? We don't know what's it. In the economic theory, or in economic theories, you have no precise definition of money. It's a thing. Thing, what kind of thing? Metal thing, for example, metal coins. Paper thing, banknotes, more modern. Okay, exchange letters of the old times, etc., or something chemical, maybe liquid. Why not? Or gas. I don't know. Maybe. In Russia, gas might be money compared with the world, because it's a very, very crucial need, and Russia has gas. Is it this? I don't know. Is it a technical tool, maybe? Organized, framed by some technical people like banks, financial intermediaries, to lead people to undertake different operations for which they would like to have some means, some technical tools, a kind of facilitator of exchanges. So the assertion is here, none of that. Money is not these things. Money is a simpler, much simpler than all these complex physical or chemical stuffs. Money is a payment system. The name of a socially organized payment system that makes the working of a given economic society possible. So that means that this simpler way of telling what is money points to a very complex definition of it. Money is society because it makes society able to exist. Which society? Capitalist market economy. Not every society. Okay? We are talking about our society. Even you can go to Cuba or Iran, that is the same thing. Okay? They are all capitalist. Because there is private property and the accumulation of wealth. This is the aim, final aim, ultimate target of every individual. From, of course, a theoretical perspective, we try to understand what are the basics of our society. But also, when you look at around, you will observe that this is the major dynamic of our existence. Okay. So money is a payment system, you can call it monetary system. I know it is not a very, very good definition, very clear definition, because I define money by monetary system. So I didn't give a definition of the concept of money. I use the concept of money to give a definition of the concept of money. It's not very satisfying, but I have no other solution. Money is the name, general name that we use to point to a payment system or monetary system. So maybe in more details that could be a bit, that could seem to be a bit more, much clearer. So these details are a few. There's a set of rules, mechanisms, laws, institutions, whatever you can think of in the working of our market economy that govern, that let society exist and that govern this existence in three points or three steps. The first is the creation, issuance. The second is circulation. What are the conditions and the extent at which we use things representative of the monetary system? And third, the repayment. When I say repayment, I have a precise idea in mind. Repayment means reimbursement. That means that you have a previous relationship behind. That you repay, you reimburse that. So that means that money is that, or that generates money. So the payment system is a debt system, private debt system. And the very specific result of this is that it allows people, decentralized people, everyone, under some conditions, to undertake every kind of private interest-based activity in order to get the ultimate target, accumulation, getting more and more wealth. This is the way, the only way to do this. Monetary payment system and its rules. And I will give you the presentation in a more accurate way. We are in a private interest economy, individuals economy, decentralized. There is no central plan. There is no Politburo. It doesn't exist. Everyone decides in a free way, at home, in dormitory, in school, everywhere, in a bar. You decide of what you would like to do in your life. The only constraint that you have to deal with, having the means of financing. How to fund my decisions. You are a simple consumer. You would like to buy some red shoes. If you have money, you can pay for, get the shoes. The only constraint is this. You haven't to ask to your God, to your king, to your minister, to your, I don't know, what is the authority You don't have to ask authorization. There is no authority. The only authority is you. This is a private individuals-based society. You have a producer. You want to make more money, more wealth. The only authority that you have is yourself. If you answer to the constraint of getting means of funding your decisions. If you have money, it's okay. You can produce everything that you want. Of course, we are in societies. We have some laws that limit our behavior. But it's not important. It doesn't matter. In every society, there are laws, rules, etc. that limit the behavior of people. It's not very different compared with the other type of society. But the only thing that makes that our society is different compared with the past societies, and it will be different compared with the future societies, but that will be the historians who will say this, is this. The ability of every individual to take every kind of his or her own interest-related decision. You cannot observe this in any other society. In our society only. And this is possible thanks to the monetary system. But you see here, we are in a very private, individuals-based, very decentralized society that we call market-based or individual-based or individual decisions-based or capitalist economy. Whatever the name you put on, there is no problem. That's the same society. Okay? That works through the same rules. How does it work? Or how does it malwork? So the word malwork doesn't mean that they could work in a better way, but it could work in a better way, but it doesn't because of some problems. No. Malwork means this is the way of working of this society, of this system. It works, and I call it malworking because results are often catastrophic. Okay? Or in other words, I will say the capitalist or the market economy is a non-equilibrium economy. If you want to use an economic term, equilibrium economics, it's the first thing that you learn at school. Through microeconomics, for example, you have supply, demand, equality between, and the equilibrium. Okay, the partial equilibrium or general equilibrium. So our society is not an equilibrium economics. That's why I use the term malworking to make reference to this idea of equilibrium. Okay, so where do they come from? The debts that generate money, that provoke monetary things. So those debts come from the process of financing of private individuals' decisions. More precisely, it is about those decisions, about entrepreneurial decisions or enterprises decisions. Okay? So, for the sake of simplicity, I take just the following schema. This one. A basic schema of a market-based economy. The payment system or monetary system. And you have financial system there. Okay. This financial system includes two blocks. Banking system that we call monetary institutions and financial intermediaries or non-monetary institutions, no bank financial institutions. What's the difference between? Banks are the only creators of money, while financial intermediaries intermediate between those who have wealth, savings, available and those who would like to use those availabilities in order to invest, to produce things because they have no money enough. Okay? So the intermediaries, as their name points to, means or do the job of reallocation of existing availabilities, existing funds through the new uses in the market. Banks don't need this to finance people. Banks, through the famous simple accounting process, can write in asset side of their account the loan or the credit to the enterprise, Gazprom, and in the liability side, they will write the deposit of Gazprom. The accounting process is always at equilibrium because the two sides have the same value. Okay? Money is created. What's it? It's a debt of Gazprom to the bank. And where does the bank get from this money? Nowhere. Nowhere, yeah. Not from government. From itself. The bank created.
I mean, if that creates, when it gives credit to someone, then someone has to give the credit back, and also the percentage of on this credit. So you have, so for instance, you take $100 and you have to give 105. When you take these $5, they do not exist like from nowhere. So the government has to create more and more money. That's where inflation comes from.
So this is the multiplier process of the monetarist approach, where normally there is no money. That's the curious thing. In standard economic theory, the multiplier process, where you put the high-powered money at the beginning that will be multiplied several times and give the credit to the economy, is the quantity theory within the economics, going back to Ricardo, David Hume, etc., is not true. Is not true. The monetary theory within the standard economics is not true, because it is based on non-monetary economics mechanism. That's why we need government who will put money at the beginning of my story. So I don't need government here. You will see the role played by public power is another one. It is not to put money, initial money, within the economy. It is another role. It's another role, and I will talk about in a few minutes. So in your picture, you're right, but it is a monetarist point of view. In your picture, money first comes from government decisions.
Money first comes from banks, and people use these banks, their money. That's where money comes from.
So, okay, but you know what does it mean? If banks need money from people, that means that deposits exist before the credit. So what are the deposits that people will put in banks? They come from, where do they come from? Their revenues, previous revenues. Who pay the revenues to the people within a society, market society? Enterprises. You work for enterprises and you get your revenue. So how can you imagine that an enterprise can give revenue to employees before previously producing? And how you can imagine that an enterprise can produce without getting before everything, without getting a required financing? You cannot get your financing from deposits of people to which you will give their revenues before, above all. You can imagine another picture. For example, money coming from Mars. Okay, Martians send us lots of money, and we will put them in deposits in banks, and banks will grant credits to enterprises. But we are not in such a society. We have this story is a kind of issue like what's the first, the egg or the chicken? Yeah. So here you use, of course, the case of the gold money. But the gold money is not, so money doesn't come from gold. Gold is used as the material representing money. Money is not gold. Gold became money. As you can use paper, or as you can use silver, or as you can use your pants, your shirts. It depends on a social convention, the way of making money circulate.
Yeah, but you can disagree that there first was gold and then paper.
No, because even then, so I don't talk about Middle Ages, okay? That's not the same society. I talk about a conceptual schema, a theory, monetary theory, that makes this society possible. In your picture, society is entirely relying on a given quantity of metals. It's not possible. It could be possible for another type of society. You cannot use gold, because when you read Marx, I don't remember well what was the chapter where Marx talked about gold and money, to show why gold is used as money. It's an excellent chapter because it shows that you have no logical means to argue that gold is money. It is only used as a material form of money. But money is not produced and reproduced through gold. That's just an historical accident, the case of the gold, because you have other cases, okay? You can go to primitive societies where money was other things, very mere things. But it was not the same money than we talk about today. Okay? So you cannot imagine an historical development to understand the way of making a monetary system today in capitalism, a kind of historical evolution where first there were some, I don't know, mere things in a primitive society where people used as money. And then this money has been transformed into a more technically perfect thing, like gold, etc. And then now paper. And then now no paper, we don't use paper anymore. There's just some bank accounts transfer. So all these things existed also in the past. But they did never get power over society, because society was not a monetary society. Money exists in every society. The human history shows that money was and is everywhere, but it is not the same. Because capitalism is not the same than Middle Age societies, which is not the same than primitive society, etc., etc. And the future will not be the same than the present. Okay? There will be maybe some money. Today we talk about Bitcoin, etc., etc. Different material forms of transferring wealth, making wealth circulate through the society. But it is not money. Okay? These are some ways, like the financial assets, are the ways of transferring wealth. They are not money. Money is the set of rules, not thing, not the material. And in this picture, in my picture, money comes into the existence from the dead creation without nothing. The only thing which can be found behind is expectations. An entrepreneur expects to get back in the future profit enough to be able to repay her debts and accumulate economic wealth. This is an expectation. And in our society, this is the way of existing. Expecting, undertaking, making, and looking at the result. The result will come only after you took positions and you will observe the result. If the result is not as it was expected, you fail. If it is as expected, you succeed. The result might be profit positive or failure. This is our way of doing. And money leads us to do this. And it is the name of all the mechanisms that make this possible, this way of decentralized decisions. Okay? That's why we don't need gold. We don't need paper. We don't need anything. We need only some rules, because we are in a society, okay? Some rules, and you will see here in my picture, you have the power, public power, central bank. Central bank doesn't issue money. Of course, she does issue, but it is not the mechanism, the core mechanism. Central bank is here in my picture to give money, her social reference. The only social reference is there, because money is a private debt, entrepreneur debt. Okay? But at the same time, you see, now I come back and you will understand better. Money is ambivalent. That means that that's a private creation, that's a private debt. Okay? A given bank doesn't need to have gold, government money, or other artifacts in her safe box. Okay, nothing. She has nothing. She has only the statute of a bank and able to write on the asset side, loan to, and on the liability side, deposit off. Okay? So the direction comes from the loans to deposits, not the opposite. Okay? And there, it's a private creation. There, the problem is that this debt flows within the economy, entire economy, as money. When an enterprise pays you your revenue, do you ask questions? Where does it come from, this revenue? You don't ask, because this revenue is called 1,000 rubles. Okay, rubles, money. Money, which money? Our money. Our what? Society's money. Public, state, government, central bank. You have images. Okay, kind of fairy tale. But it is real. It's not only fairy tale. Okay? Boss. Government has no money. Central bank has no money. They are not wealth powers. They are institutions, mere institutions. They don't exist otherwise than as public institutions. They have no wealth. They have no gold. There is no gold on earth. Of course, we have some gold to use in a funny way. But the gold money is a fairy tale. Always it has been a fairy tale. Obsession. Keynes called it, the gold, a barbarian relic. The rest of the barbarian societies, not of our society. That's a symbol. Okay? That's why at the same time, these private debts need to be guaranteed. Guaranteed, what does it mean? Nothing. Guaranteed in your mind, guaranteed maybe in the rules of the law, where it said your deposits are under public guarantee up to, I don't know, $100,000. Beyond, no guarantee, excuse me. But there is this kind of symbol of public guarantee. But public power has no economic power to pay you if the bank fails. There is no money. There is no money, but as the public power is the public power, she is always able to pay you in case of general failure. And you will never ask the question, where does come from this money of the public power? Because public power has no money. Public power usually has lots of debts, never lots of wealth. Even for in that public power, you will never ask this question. You will accept the public power pay you in case of bank failures. This magic. This is the rule of the system. The reference on the public power is at the core of the viability of our private debt-based monetary system. Because money is entirely privately created, that we need public power to make people sure that they will keep their wealth in these private uncertain relationships where every day there are failures. Banks fail, institutions fail, you have big systemic crises. You know what about the value, economic value of the 2007-2008 crisis today? The last calculus gives us about $50,000 billion. $50,000 billion. I don't know how many zeros you have. $50,000 billion. The cost, the loss of the last financial crisis. It's a very rough calculus. No public power has this money. So this crisis didn't result in the disappearance of our society because public power intervened and said, stop guys, I master the house under guarantee. Which kind of guarantee? You do never ask this question. If you ask this question, there is no answer. Everything collude immediately. Society cannot survive. That's why in some emerging economies, in case of crisis, if the public power cannot convince people that the house is under guarantee, the monetary system collapses. And then immediately monetary substitution comes into the picture. The dollarization process. Because you cannot have confidence, trust in your monetary system, in your public power. Even if you know, or you don't ask this question, but you know that public power doesn't generate money. Money is always private relationship, private debt relationship. Okay? But when it doesn't work, you need public power to keep everything under security. Okay? Even if public power has no value. That's why the ambivalence of money is very, very important and interesting thing, and reflects also the complexity of the working of such a society. Private, but at the same time public. That cannot be only private, it is not really public. The ruble does not belong to Russian government, Russian state. Ruble is a private debt, but it must be resting on Russian society. represented by Russian public power. But the public power has no power in economic terms. Very ambiguous. That makes that it works, it malworks, etc., etc. It's very impossible to give the real conditions of making such a society viable in a sure. The second aspect of money or monetary system is transversality. Transversality means that money is everywhere. Money makes society and is everywhere. What does it mean? It means a very simple phenomenon. Even if you are not involved within monetary relations, within financial markets, because you are a simple employee, you have no wealth, you cannot invest financially, etc. You will be affected, directly or indirectly, every day by the monetary and financial decisions of the markets. Because you cannot live out of monetary relations, because monetary relations make the whole society. Your job depends on the monetary financial decisions of the markets. Your school will depend, your education program will depend, the government spending will depend, the enterprises projects will depend on the evolution of markets that depend on monetary and financial relations results. In case of crisis, everything stops. When things go fine, everything develops. More wealth, more jobs, more revenues, more consumption, etc., etc. But there is no control. Nobody has control over this. Okay? That's the market economy. That's the monetary economy. Market economy is possible thanks to the monetary rules. So money is of course, social institution because we have this reference to the public aspect, public power relation of money. But at the same time, we know that money is entirely private, related to private operations, private expectations, entrepreneurial undertakings. Okay? This is the decentralized and private aspect of our society, made possible thanks to monetary rules. But at the same time, those rules require absolutely a public reference, even if it is not the public power that creates money. Okay? Of course, government can spend and can generate new monetary creations because government has an economic existence. Okay? But it doesn't mean that that's government that creates money. Government too contribute to monetary creation. Okay? Even if government is not a private debt, government undertakes economic operations and then needs money. And what we call from the 80s the independence of central banks was the way of preventing the intervention of the government in the economy, in the monetary creation process, like the private enterprises. That was a political position we imposed to the public power. It doesn't change things because government spends and indirectly intervenes, contributes to the monetary creation process. Before the independence of central banks, government had the public power to impose central banks some credits. Central bank is not a bank, but legally speaking, government has the legal power and could ask central bank to give them money. How? Central bank has no money. Central bank has nothing. Central bank is not a bank. It's called bank. It's not a bank. It's just social reference that give a guarantee over the market monetary relations, telling that money is public, it's not private. Central bank is the big liar. But this big liar makes private monetary debts circulate through the economy as public money. Okay? And there we have two constraints within such an economy. Financing constraints. Every economic agent must finance his or her decisions, must pay for investments. You are a consumer, you have to pay for your spendings. You are an enterprise, you have to pay for your investments, your production, etc., etc. Okay? And I repeat, relative to what you said a few minutes ago, those are the revenues of individuals given mainly by private enterprises, because we are in a private enterprise society, that give the savings that some people could use to fund some entrepreneurial activities in financial markets. To get savings, to lend to enterprises, you need that enterprises first give you your revenue. And to give you your revenue, enterprises need to finance their activity, and they need to get funds from banks, and those funds don't exist. They are generated through debt process. Accounting process is very simple accounting process, and there is nothing beyond. There is just expectations. Enterprise expects, asks for financing, bank thinks that this is a good project that could bring lots of profit, because banks charge some interest rates on the grant, credit grant. Okay, it is the profit of the bank, and therefore banks makes this accounting operation, putting on assets, loans, and liabilities, deposits. Okay? So now, the problem is, what's finance? Finance is all the things which are related to these monetary operations, and especially, and in the sense of your classical textbooks, finance means the operations of reallocation of monetary availabilities through the economy. What's the famous definition of a financial intermediary? The institution lending the money of some people to other people. Lending the money of households that are the saving units to enterprises, who are the spending units. It's not the case anymore within our economy, very financialized, where everyone, individuals, consumers, enterprises, invest or borrow money to undertake different operations. To, for example, you will buy your home, your house. In this case, you will borrow money, like the American households before the 2007 crisis, 2007-2008 crisis, and this kind of market of financial intermediation gave the possibility to several million households in the United States without enough revenues to have access to homes. Fairy tale period. With some thousands of dollars of revenue amount, they could buy big houses. Very nice. And this gave the possibility to the financial system and the banks to create new financial products where these houses' debts had been used in order to make specific financial portfolios, very speculative ones, etc., that we call the mortgage system and financialized mortgage system that resulted after 2 or 3 years, not more, in the famous 2007-2008 crisis. That is one of the aspects of finance as a double-edged sword. Finance is a double-edged sword. Pourquoi? Because we need financing, we need money, we need to spend, we need to invest. You cannot invest without money, you cannot consume without money. We are in a monetary society. You cannot be free of your decisions without money, without financing. But financing means debt, that means repayment. Will you be able to repay your debts? We don't know, because we take decisions today, we spend today, we don't know if tomorrow we will be able to get back enough to be able to repay. That's the game. That's the price that we have to pay for freedom of action. This is market economy. This is capitalist economy. This is individualist economy. Possible through these monetary debt relationships. But the result is uncertain. The result is accumulation of debts. The result is recurrent crisis. You cannot repay. If the number of people who cannot repay is important, this is a systemic crisis. Everything collapses, everything stops, financial markets stop, and government and public power intervenes in order to make people calm down for the viability of entire society. That's why finance or financial markets, which are the markets where the financial operations are developed, is a double-edged sword. We need finance, but with finance, we die. This is the double edge. For our life, we need finance, and the finance results in our death, crisis, instability, etc. Because we are in a decentralized, decisions-based society. There is no spontaneous, general, society-wide equilibrium. And finance, at the core of our social economic existence, is a very big stake that you cannot leave to the market mechanism, even if financial markets are private. The control of cannot be private because it's very, the answer is very obvious. The answer consists of thinking of how a legal system can work. Take the case of crime. The case of crime, you are a criminal, okay? You commit a crime. You will never confess, of course. Okay, you commit a crime because you get back some benefits. Okay, imagine that's an economic relationship. Okay, the liberal financial regulation means that we let people assess their financial soundness by themselves. There is no public intervention in order to supervise and control and prevent or prohibit different potentially systemically risky behavior. Okay? You let people decide of. Everyone, banks, financial intermediaries, etc., decide of their own way of doing, their risk to be undertaken, and also their own self-assessment, self-regulation, self-control process. This is the liberal financial regulation, which holds since the late 70s or early 80s all around the world. What does it mean? It means that, imagine our legal system, the judge and the criminal is the same person. And the criminal, the guy who does things, has to decide of his or her soundness. If I undertake these activities because I think that it will be profitable to me, I take the risk. I will never say, oh, it's very, very uncertain and it's not a good operation. Because when you undertake these activities, a bank or a financial intermediary, you will sell products related to your activities. You will never say to your clients, oh no, don't buy these products, they are very risky, please. The self-assessment, self-regulation consists of telling, yes, what I undertake, what I would like to sell you is a good product. I checked everything is okay. Okay? You cannot be criminal and judge at the same time about your crime. The liberal regulation is this, entirely, without any exception. It does mean this. I don't know how people could believe that it could work, but we still believe that it can work because we didn't change the liberal regulation since 2007-2008 crisis. Because it is an ideological case. We believe in the markets, we believe in the free markets, free individual action, and we don't want to intervene, to restrict, to constrain the market operations and financial markets. That's an ideological position. It's not a scientific, objective approach to the regulation, which holds today, still today. So here, finance is, we need it, and at the same time, we know objectively that it is a source of instability. So we have to intervene in order to frame it, to organize markets, to supervise markets, to check their working. As you can not imagine that a judge and a criminal could be the same person, in this case, we have to separate financial markets and financial actors and the supervisor. You cannot put the same thing in the same basket. Okay, these two things. This is the idea. Also, another idea is that today we know that the development of financial markets does not obviously and spontaneously result in the development of the economy. And the quotation that I give you from Secheti and Karoubi from Bank for International Settlements, so those are not anti-liberal guys, okay? Those are the guys who work for the normal international institutions, which are very, very market-friendly institutions. So those guys, among others, of course, show that when you take, in the recent history, in the 2, 3, 4 decades, the evolution of financial markets and the evolution of the economies, more financial markets develop, less is the growth. So there is no bridge, transition from financial development and economic development. Okay? Because in the 90s, lots of people say that financial development and economic development go together. Okay? And they said financial development means financial liberalization. Opening and liberalization of financial market means that retreat of public power from the supervision and regulation process of financial operations, letting financial actors deciding of their own strategies and ensuring their own self-regulation. Judge and criminal becoming the same person. Okay? So this development didn't result in economic development. Oppositely, it resulted in financial crisis. Double-edged. Here, just a figure about the relationship between financial sector growth and productivity, economic productivity growth, and you see the line is a decreasing one, and you have some information about the contents of this work, including different economies, the most developed, advanced economies, of course, to be able to conduct such a study, case study. And the result is unambiguous. The relationship is negative over the period. So why? Because in a few words, financial development is, at least in the last decades, meant financialization. Financialization means the transformation of capitalism into a financialized capitalism where real activities have lower or decreasing part of the whole economic wealth accumulation process. And what generates wealth is more related to financial operations, mostly speculative ones, than to real production economy. And this explains why during the last decades, where, for example, just to take the case of the United States economy, where the arithmetically numbered economic growth was not so bad, the job creation was totally absent. The revenue increase was totally absent. The wealth of American household stayed constant or decreased, while United States economy got a positive growth, higher than the European economies. Where is all this wealth? In financial operations. This wealth came from financial operations. This wealth was speculative finance. This is financialization. When the part of financial operations and financial returns or profits or whatever the name we put on become higher than real economic operations, production system operations, profits related to real industries, etc. Is it an abnormal situation? This is not an abnormal situation. Why? Because it's capitalism. Capitalism looks for different means of making profit. That might be real economy, that might be financial operations, speculation, whatever. So markets spontaneously cannot organize themselves in order to give more advantages to real job-generating operations and preventing speculative operations. This mechanism, such a mechanism doesn't exist. Markets are based on one more core incentive, looking for more profit, expecting more profit. If you believe that through financial operations you can get more profit, you will put your money in financial operations. If you believe that through the production of schools, through the production of tables, through the production of computers, you can get more profit, you will invest in these real activities that could generate new jobs and increase the people's welfare. This is the simple story. There is no public organization for public good of society. Okay? So if you see that when you liberalize financial markets, that creates some bad incentives that push people to invest in speculative operations and reduce the part of real economy and the real revenues and the jobs, in this case, we have to intervene in order to organize, reorganize, reshape market working in favor of job-creating real sector operations. But markets cannot do this spontaneously. The financialization process reflects this way of being of a market economy. and shows that a market economy is not spontaneously equilibrium, wealth-creating, people welfare-enhancing economy. When you look at the previous works of international organizations, take the case of IMF. IMF every year, 2 times a year, publishes a work which is called Global Financial Stability Report. This report looks very closely at the working of the markets and contains all the valuable and sufficient information about the state of the world. We know through these reports how the world develops, what are the weaknesses and dangers. In its report of 2005 and 2006, just some months ago, before the official 2007-2008 crisis, IMF says these words: after looking at the evolution of markets, we can assert that everything goes fine, well. Markets gained soundness, became stronger after the 2001 dot-com crisis, and then thanks to the liberalization and opening up of financial markets, things became more efficient and can lead now people, enterprises, etc., to undertake new operations and to create jobs and to create growth. 2005-2006 reports. So in 2005 and 2006, the data were such that you could see if there would be a systemic crisis or not in a few years. Because lots of economists did this job and gave us enough information to put the focus on this danger. But IMF took a kind of ideological position and repeated that everything was okay. Some months later, we had the big collapse of the American banking system. I had another work on the speeches of the Federal Reserve officials like Alan Greenspan or Ben Bernanke, who were the former governor of the Fed. And those speeches show that from the 2005 till 2007, also from the 2000s, the governors of the Fed were aware of the dangers, increasing dangers of the working of liberalized financial markets, because they talk about in their speeches, public speeches. They are available even today. You can get access on the site of Federal Reserve. And they say that things evolve a bit badly. We have to pay attention. But they end their speeches by saying that we keep believing in the capacity and ability of financial markets to deal with these dangers. That means that we don't need to intervene and change regulatory rules. You see, it's very, very curious. It's very ideological situation. Guys know that danger is there and develops and increasing. It is increasing, but they don't want to intervene and take more restrictive decisions in order to calm down the financial markets' ardors. And the crisis comes into the picture a few years later. Every time you can observe this kind of evolution. Crises do never come through a magic and surprising way. Contrary to what Greenspan said at the Senate committee after the 2007-2000 crisis, he said, yes, that we didn't see the crisis come. No, it's false. It's not true, because he said in his previous speeches that the danger was increasing. Okay? So, another very curious situation is the following figure from the 2006 April Global Financial Stability Report of IMF. And in this figure, you can see that the net income and is increasing, and no performing loans, the danger of the balance sheet of banking system, is decreasing. And IMF concluded that the situation was very, very good, and there was no risk for the financial system. So when you take the net income through speculative operations, and if you, in your self-regulation model, if you put 3A for your soundness of your balance sheet, because you put this mark by yourself, you are the criminal and judge. Of course, everything is okay. You have huge profits and low risk. But who did assess the risk? Yourself. You will never assess your risk in a higher level, because if you say that your risk is very high, you cannot sell your products in financial markets. It's obvious. And through the self-assessment process, and without asking questions about where do all these over profits come from within the banking system, IMF concluded that everything was okay. And few months later, we got the famous 2007-2008 crisis, and all the American banking system collapsed. If Fed and central government did not pay for the entire banking system, today we were in a kind of world war. Because don't forget, when the economy doesn't work, the weapons talk. This is the human history. So now, in a few words, I will end up my presentation. All this is to point to the necessary changes in our regulatory system, financial regulation. If we accept that markets cannot work spontaneously at equilibrium, if we accept that financial markets, once liberalized, often result in malworking and generate speculative activities, and then are potentially crisis-prone, in this case, we have to change our way of regulating markets. And this way of regulating markets here depends, of course, on institutions, the quality of institutions, but it doesn't mean that institutions must be market institutions, because in the liberal financial system, institutions were market institutions. It didn't work. We need extra market institutions, like maybe central bank or government agencies that would be able to intervene to prevent market actors' projects or market actors' behavior from being entirely speculative and systemically risky. So we have to de-risk, reduce the risk, de-risk the market actors' behavior. To do this, I can't see another alternative than to suggest some further restrictions and constraints to calm down the speculative ardors of financial actors. And to make this kind of a framework possible, we have to follow or implement one rule, the rule of prevention. So my reference is simple. My reference is related to the works done about the environmental economics. What is the rule? To imagine a regulation to reduce pollution or to prevent pollution and to make Earth viable. Because today we know that our Earth is not anymore viable. If we don't find solutions to change our way of doing about the environment, about the consequences of our way of living on Earth, things will be really worsened and quickly. So the principle, the rule that we implement, even if we don't implement effectively, of course, you know about Kyoto Agreement, you know about the COP24, etc., etc. Today we are discussing about these days. Things don't change, unfortunately. But the rule behind is clear. We have to be preventive. We cannot deal with crisis situations after. We cannot change an over-polluted world. We have to prevent the pollution. Once the world is polluted, it's okay, it's finished. Okay? This is the same thing for financial system. Once the financial crisis is there, it's finished. You cannot go back, come back. You cannot counterbalance the consequences, bad consequences of systemic crisis through state interventions. Look at what we had as experience after the 2007-2008 crisis. $50,000 billion. What are the results? Unemployment is increasing, growth doesn't exist anymore. Nowhere all around the world. We have lots of mini wars everywhere. People killing people. This is the success of our financialization. Very good result. And we have no solution. We cannot solve this kind of systemic problems after, once they are there. We have to prevent them. This is the rule of prevention. So now the job is consisting of establishing, setting up the criteria which could give us enough information to know if things could evolve badly or goodly, if things can be worsened, etc., etc. And prevent actions who would have potential to worsen things. This is the preventive rule of prevention. You inhibit, you prohibit actions which could worsen the situation. This is the rule of prevention. And the economic actors, market players, who would like, for example, to innovate, to supply new products, new ways of doing, we call them financial innovations, will have the obligation to show that those new activities or those new products will not have negative consequences on the system. If not, if they cannot, they will not be authorized to supply, to undertake this kind of systemically risky activities. This is the rule. And it will never change our life. It will change maybe our life in a positive sense, but it will never change our life more than this, because with financial innovations or without financial innovations, things will depend on what we are able to produce and to live in our social existence. We don't need any innovation in financial markets if these innovations don't give us better situation. If these innovations, when you take the recent period of financialization, if these innovations give us a worsened world, give us systemic crisis, give us job destruction, we don't need financial innovations, and we don't need financial liberalization. This is the preventive rule. How to do this, politically speaking, it's another issue in a world dominated by liberal economics. Okay? So here, I think that one reference, famous reference, is or stays, remains Hyman Minsky's approach to financial instability, because Minsky said that financial instability in a capitalist economy is generated from within, from the working of markets themselves. It is not a surprise. It doesn't come from Mars. It comes from the working of the markets. Therefore, we have to supervise, we have to reframe the working of markets through some constrained rules in order to prevent them from undertaking too risky operations. So maybe I will stop there to not to kill you more. And maybe let you ask questions if any. Here I have just some directions, some principles, some ways of thinking of financial markets, like the publicness of financial stability, such that what I said a few minutes ago at the beginning of this session, financial stability cannot be produced, organized through market mechanisms, through the markets themselves, because financial instability is generated by the working of markets. Okay? So we have to intervene through extra market, out of market ways in order to reframe things, to limit some things, to change some things, to make markets more able to give society better results. It could be called the collective provision, collective action. That means we have to organize things in a public way. And it is called, in a few words, macro-prudential regulation. Macro-prudential regulation means you frame your regulation according to the macro stability. This is the objective. And you argue from this perspective that micro stability or micro safety or the situation, the soundness of individual players cannot result, cannot ensure systemic stability. Therefore, systemic stability must be thought of not in terms of micro individual situation, but in terms of the situation of the entire society. Often we say, and it is an old issue within the economics, we say that there is no bridge between micro rationality and macro coherence, macro stability. Therefore, why I say this? Because the dominant regulation in financial markets is mainly resting still, even after the 2007 crisis, on the micro regulation models, micro self-regulation models. They cannot work, they didn't work, we have to change them. We didn't yet change them, we have to do this. And the final is a true three-rule regulatory model. Just some ideas to sum up all this. Rule of prevention and forward regulatory action. You prevent and you look what could be the result of these things, these activities. And you prevent some activities and some others you can authorize them, etc., etc. The second rule is the continuous no private interest related checking or supervision process. That means that self-regulation doesn't make sense. The regulation must come from public intervention, extra market mechanism. Okay? The judge and criminal cannot be the same person. If they are the same person, it is called conflict of interest. Any regulatory system that is resting on conflict of interest cannot work. And third, rule of separation between regulator and regulatees, it is corollary to the previous rule. You have to separate in a strict way who regulates, who is regulated. Okay? The rest depends on our ability to imagine some practical ways of implementing such a model. Also, of course, depending on the institutions and political situation. Lots of complex variables intervening in the result. This is the job of the future generations. I hope so. Thank you for your attention, for your resistance, for your smile too, and also for your contribution.